Hello, and thanks for joining us on this St. Patrick's Day special of the Unsolicited Film Reviews podcast. Happy St. Paddy's Day to you and yours, and a grand welcome on our journey here across the Emerald Isle. Zach Miller's the name, and I'm a fifth Irish. Top of the morning to you, Martin. How
Uh,
Irish are you?
I'm about a quarter Irish, but I will not attempt an accent. I'm terrible at accents, as people know by now. So no attempt, but I've got some serious Irish in me, and from the Cooke side of the family, actually. So there we are.
So between us, we almost make up half an Irishman for those of you accusing us of cultural appropriation. Okay, I'm done. What's today's topic, Martin?
Today we're going to discuss Irish actors and actresses, which we thought would be a great thing to do on St. Paddy's Day, and should be a lot of fun. Hey, have you ever been to Ireland, Zach?
No, I've never made the trip through to Emerald Isle.
I've been once, only once, but it was fantastic, and I'd love to go back. And even then, I was only in Dublin, but love that city. Amazing city. I happened to be there and caught U2 playing
Hmm.
in Croke Park, the big stadium there in Dublin. It was a sort of homecoming for them.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was it. Just the whole trip was amazing, and can't wait to go back sometime.
Yeah, so we're gonna each be covering five actors that we picked, and so it's gonna be 10 total, and we hope you enjoy. We're gonna keep things fun and not just read their IMDb bios. So you can go do that on your own time.
So, in the spirit of keeping things fun, what are you drinking, Zach?
Right now, I am drinking just a classic Guinness draft,
Nice.
but at halftime, I'm gonna teach you all how to make an Irish car bomb. Should be fun.
Very nice. I decided to switch things up and go with another Irish ale, Kilkenny, which has long been one of my favorites. So, cheers.
Cheers. So, who is our first actor?
So, the first one we're going to talk about is Saoirse Ronan, who has, one of the most Irish first names possible, where it's spelled in a way that doesn't at all seem like it should be pronounced the way it is. So Saoirse was actually, though, born in the Bronx, which I didn't realize in 1994, but to Irish parents. And then they moved back to Ireland when she was 3, and she grew up in and around Dublin. Uh, Her first credit was 4 episodes of an Irish show called The Clinic when she was like 9 years old. So she's been acting forever. Her first full movie credit, though, was a movie called I Could Never Be Your Woman with Michelle Pfeiffer and Paul Rudd. So good way to start. She has been nominated, despite her, being fairly young still. She's been nominated for 4 Oscars already. Little Women, Lady Bird, Brooklyn, and Atonement. And it was really Atonement that like set off her career and made her super famous. Um, she so fun fact, it's just gonna have little fun facts for everyone here. She actually auditioned for the role of Luna Lovegood in the
Mm.
Harry Potter movies. I lost out to another Irish actress, actually. But I just thought that was kind of funny. It'd be interesting to see her doing Luna Lovegood. So, my favorite performance. I'm going to give my favorite and then like best under the radar performance for each of my actors. My favorite performance of hers is actually probably Mary Queen of Scots.
Mm.
I mean, I'm a sucker for historical movies of any sort anyway, but I thought she was just fantastic. She acted opposite Margot Robbie in that, where Margot Robbie's playing Queen Elizabeth, and the two of them. I mean, they were rarely on screen together, but just a tour de force from both of them, but especially from Saoirse Ronan. I thought she was fantastic. Um, my best under that's the problem with her. I said I was going to do under the radar performances from all of them, but ever since Atonement, like everything she's been in has been pretty big, and so she hasn't really had too many under the radar things. But if I had to pick, I guess I would say there was this movie called Hannah about I can't remember exactly when Hannah was, and basically in it she plays this girl. She was still fairly young, so it was early on. She plays this girl who's raised in isolation in the wilderness by her father to be an assassin, and then
Mm.
comes back into the city. And so she plays. She just does this great job of like the detachment that you need, the emotional detachment of being an assassin, and yet at the same time she's young and sort of sweet and naive at the same time. I just thought it was, for her age and for what essentially is just an action movie, I thought it was a pretty nuanced and interesting performance. So those are some of my favorites. How about you, Zach? Any good Saoirse Ronan memories?
Yeah, I haven't seen Hannah, but that sounds excuse me, that sounds really good.
They actually made
And
it into a TV series as well.
huh,
She's not in the TV series though.
the way I always remember how to pronounce her name, and I think I forget if it was on Fallon or Kimmel, one of those late night talk shows, and she's like, "It's Saoirse, rhymes with inertia." I was like, "All right, good to know," because it looks like Sarcy or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that may have been on Colbert. I remember at one time Colbert had her on and was asking her to pronounce. He just held up a
mm.
sign with different Irish names, and then she would just say one, and they'd be the most increasingly complicatedly spelled names. And when he got to the last one and she pronounced it, he just goes, "You go to hell." It just didn't at all sound like the way it was spelled. But that's Irish names for it.
Yeah, and to your fact about her auditioning for Luna Lovegood and Harry Potter, you'll notice that there is a lot of crossover between these actors and the various projects that we cover. And I didn't really realize that until I was doing research and compiling the list. Like a lot of these men and women are very frequent collaborators with one another.
That is true. Well, it's a small isle. All
And
right. Who's
she
your
is
first
no,
one?
hold
Oh,
on. She is number 6 on the Irish Times list of best Irish actors of all time.
okay.
And sadly, it seems like she has come out and kind of floated the idea that she's almost semi-retired at
What?
this point. Like she wants to settle down in Ireland and start a family. And she's like, if Greta Gerwig calls, then I'm there. But other than that, she's not in a rush to capitalize on her momentum right now, which is kind of a tragedy for the industry.
That absolutely is. Yeah, no, she's for her age that she's been one of the best actresses of the last 15 years, I would say. Yeah, that'd be a shame. I mean, obviously, go live your life, Saoirse. Do you if you want to settle down. That would be a blow to the industry for sure.
Yeah, I mean, she already has more accolades than 95% of the people in Hollywood. So I mean, even if she does hang it up now, she's one of the greats. So, but
Absolutely,
I hope she doesn't because she has a lot more to give for sure.
definitely.
So my first one, we're kind of going roughly young to old here. There's going to be some discrepancies, but mostly that's where we came down. And my first one is Barry Keoghan. He is 32 and one of the absolute rising stars in the industry. He was born and raised in Summerhill, Dublin. A lot of these guys are from Dublin or the surrounding area. He's already won a BAFTA and has been nominated for two Golden Globes and two Oscars. His breakout year came in 2017 with roles in both Christopher Nolan's blockbuster Dunkirk and Yorgos Lanthimos's kind of more um, subdued Killing of the Sacred Deer. Since then, he's been on an absolute tear. He's been in everything from big budget Marvel movies to HBO miniseries. He was in The Eternals and Chernobyl, and critically acclaimed indie movies. His two recent standout roles include a starring role for both him and his member in Saltburn. If anybody's seen that movie, you know exactly what I mean. And as well as a supporting role in The Banshees of Inisherin, for which he got his BAFTA and an Oscar nom. Spoiler: The Banshees of Inisherin will feature heavily in this podcast, especially for the actors I'm presenting. He's also a one-time boyfriend of pop superstar Sabrina Carpenter. In 2022, he was arrested in his hometown for public intoxication. I didn't know that was a thing in Ireland, but I think it's more of uh, a rite of passage, if you will, than a black mark on his record for any young Irishman, especially if you're in the arts. Barry is a supporter of Manchester United, and as a Chelsea supporter, I find that to be his primary character flaw.
I did not know that. All right. Yeah, he's an actor. He's obviously a very good actor. Yeah, he's had some. I think there's been some controversies around him recently. Maybe it's just the Sabrina Carpenter stuff. I try not to pay attention to that stuff too much. Maybe he cheated on her or something. I don't know. Anyway, he's obviously a good actor. There's always something a little off-putting about him, uh,
Hmm.
and but in a good way. Like he's somebody you can't quite take your eyes off of when he's on screen because there's just something a little odd and off-putting about him, which was perfect that he played in Saltburn because he was absolutely that kind of like Tom Ripley kind of character in that movie, and yeah, he's got an interesting future ahead of him for sure.
Yeah, because he has those like steel blue eyes, but he kind of has that like broken nose. Like he looks like he's been in more than a few scraps in his life. So yeah, he has a very, very unique look. But as you said, yeah, you can't really take your eyes off him because he is that captivating. And he is number 27 on the Irish Times list as greatest Irish actors. And at 32, that ain't bad.
Not bad at all. Not bad at all. All right, my next one is Pierce Brosnan, who was born May 16th, 1953 in Drogheda, Ireland. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right or not. He went to drama school in London for 3 years, though, and he actually started on the stage, which is kind of surprising. Um, his first credit was a TV movie called Murphy's Stroke, but his first sort of movie credit, released movie, he had some TV movies, but his first real movie credit was something called The Long Good Friday, where he was credited as first Irishman. So it's just a great start for him as an Irish actor. He obviously rose to prominence in the 80s playing Remington Steele, which
Mm.
was a show that ran on NBC for 5 seasons, where he played a suave and mysterious private detective. And so it's not surprising because of that role that pretty soon he was the front runner to replace the aging Roger Moore in the James Bond franchise. However, this caused a problem because when the producers, the Broccoli family, who just handed over the Bond franchise, when they started talking to him, this got a lot of press, and people thought, "Oh, great, he's going to be the next James Bond," and all that attention caused NBC to actually re-up Remington Steele for another season, and he was under contract. So that meant that he lost the Bond job, which and then like promptly a year later they canceled Remington Steele. So that kind of sucked for him. But he managed to tread water. He made some pretty good movies. He was in Mrs. Doubtfire, for instance, in between, and then finally in '95, obviously, because we all know this, he got his chance at Bond again, um, and he played Bond 4 times. And then ever since then, tons of big movies since then, like Mars Attacks, Dante's Peak, Thomas Crown Affair, Mamma Mia. Just recently, Black Adam, if you want to consider that a big movie. I don't know. But yeah, so okay, here's my fun fact about Pierce Brosnan. When he was young, he learned actually how to be a fire eater, and for a while in his youth, he had like a fire eating act, and he actually did it once on the Muppet Show after
Oh, okay.
after Goldeneye came out. So who knew? That's just a fun little talent. So my favorite performance of his, it's got to be Goldeneye. I mean, come on, who are we kidding here? The Bond franchise it's hard to think of now, but the Bond franchise was in really bad shape at that point, and that movie was pretty important. And not only do I think it's one of the top 5 Bond movies because it just hits every note, I think so did he. Like he gave us exactly what we needed from Bond in that moment, and I just thought he was fantastic in it. So Goldeneye is my favorite performance. My favorite, or my, I think his best under the radar performance was probably a movie that came out a few years ago called The Foreigner with
Oh,
Jackie
yeah, yeah.
Chan. I don't know if anybody saw this thing, but it was kind of an action movie. But in it, he plays a former IRA member who's been trying to work his way into more of the political side, I guess, kind of the Sinn Féin side, but has a hard time getting rid of the old ties and kind of gets sucked back in and ends up just being this character, like just total downfall of a character because he can't quite let go of those of the troubles of the past, and Jackie Chan's character is just on a revenge mission. So, but I thought it was just he did a very good kind of I said nuanced again for Saoirse Ronan, but I thought this was actually a pretty nuanced performance as well for what essentially was a Jackie Chan action movie.
Yeah, Pierce Brosnan was my James Bond growing up. GoldenEye was the first one that I ever saw, and I'm very pleased to know that that's in your top five because it has the nostalgia value for me as well as being just like hitting all the notes of a James Bond movie.
Yeah.
So you being the aficionado, I'm glad that it's so high on your list. But yeah, so he was my James Bond, and I think that I don't want to say it's been a detriment to his career because that's a huge role. It's one of the most iconic British roles ever created. But that said, I think it's led to him not being able to lean into his Irishness a lot.
Mm,
And the like what you said about the foreigner, he hasn't really had that many opportunities to lean into that. And because he like I guarantee most people wouldn't even know that he is Irish just because he was James Bond. So
right.
yeah, I thought that was an interesting point. He is number 15 on that Irish Times list of best Irish actors of all time.
Okay.
And yeah, he's managed to age extremely gracefully, and he is still working constantly. He's coming out with a new series in on March 20th, actually. It's dropping on Paramount Plus. It's called Mobland with Tom Hardy and Helen Mirren, and I just found out about that earlier today, so I'm definitely going to be checking that out. See
Yeah,
the
that's a hell of
darker,
a cast.
yeah, the darker side of Pierce. So then, my next one is Kerry Condon. She is 42, born in Turles, Ireland. I'm assuming it's Turles because TH always means tuh in their language, so I'm gonna go with that. She has a BAFTA and an Academy Award nomination for Take a Drink, The Banshees of Inisherin. Also, she was in the Indie Darling, Three Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. She was Mike's daughter-in-law, Stacy, in Better Call Saul. Like Barry Keoghan, she's been in a Marvel blockbuster or two, a couple of Iron Man's, Avengers. Although it was voice only because she was the voice of Tony Stark's Friday software.
That's right. Yeah, I think I did know that. Right. Yeah.
My first introduction to her had to be her turn as Octavia in the HBO series Rome, which she was excellent in. And while not anywhere close to a household name, she's been working constantly for 20 years plus. So it's always good. And she has a prominent role in the upcoming Formula One movie, aptly titled F1 with Brad Pitt. So we're going to see her again later this year.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I first knew her in Rome as well. And then it seemed like there was a long time where we didn't really see much of her. Maybe I just missed some of the things she was in, and obviously, the voice in Iron Man, so you didn't actually see her on screen. But now, the past year and a half, again, all of a sudden she's getting tons of good roles. I think a lot of this is spilling off of her success in Banshees of Inisherin. So good for her. She's managed to almost have a second act to her career, even though, as you say, she was actually working consistently that whole time. But it was funny when we came up with these lists a little behind the scenes. We actually had a hard time finding a lot of really big famous Irish actresses as opposed to Irish actors. And so once Saoirse Ronan was off the list, it was basically, you start getting people who aren't quite as famous. But Kerry Condon's a really good choice because she's an interesting actress, and it'd be great if her career really takes off again from here.
Yeah, and as we've discussed in the past, actresses over 40 typically tend to just disappear, unfortunately.
Yeah,
And so for her to kind of really be hitting her stride in her early 40s is a very positive sign.
yeah.
And speaking of, I was going to go with Fiona Shaw in this slot, but we already discussed her in our actors and actresses over 50 podcast that we did a few months back. So if you want to
Yeah.
go back and listen to me wax poetic about Fiona Shaw, go right ahead.
All right. So my next one then. This is probably, I would say, the most successful Irish actor of all time, and that's Liam Neeson. I mean, he's definitely has a case anyway to be the most successful Irish actor. He was born June 7th, 1952 in Ballymena, Northern Ireland. So he's Northern Ireland, but he was from a Catholic household. So I think it's fun that we still get the we still get the green for him because he was born in a Catholic household. Um, his first credit was in a 1978 movie called Pilgrim's Progress. Then he had like a bunch of smaller roles in the 80s and early 90s. He just had a long time before he actually sort of became a household name. So he was in movies like Excalibur, The Mission, which I've mentioned before, one of my absolute favorite movies. The Deadpool, a Dirty Harry movie. But then obviously he really gained prominence in 1993 with Schindler's List. Um, and Schindler's List actually is where he has his only Oscar nomination. So that's the only one he got, and he didn't win, but that's the only one he's ever had. But obviously, since Schindler's List, he's just been in ton of big things. Star Wars, Gangs of New York, Love Actually, Kingdom of Heaven, Batman Begins, like all these just massive movies. But then his career kind of changed again in 2008 at the age of 56 with the movie Taken. And then since then, he's basically pretty much only taken on paint by numbers action movies as an older guy.
He's taken on.
Yes, take it on. Which is an interesting choice for him, but why not? I mean, I don't think he really needs to stretch his acting muscles too much in those, but he's obviously getting paid well. He's basically into almost, he's obviously not retired. He's working hard. He's doing tons of these movies, but he doesn't have to really work as hard, I think, as he did in some of those earlier roles that he had. Fun fact for him, hold up your drink, please. He actually once worked in the Guinness Brewery. I can't
Hey,
think of anything much more Irish than that. Actually, the second fun fact for him that I didn't realize, he dated Helen Mirren, which we've already mentioned, Helen Mirren for about 4 years. So good on Liam Neeson. Um, Helen Mirren's great. My favorite performance of his, I mean, it's probably got to be Schindler's List. It was just, especially for a guy who wasn't really that famous before that, it's just such an outstanding performance. I actually rewatched it a couple of months ago because I'd been to see there was an Auschwitz exhibit at the museum nearby here, and I just got interested and wanted to watch it again. And I forgot, like, obviously it's incredibly sad, moving, but I'd forgotten just how sort of clever and funny his character is at the beginning when he's trying to charm all the German officers, and how much charisma he has. It's just a really, really good performance. So that's got to be my favorite performance. Except possibly what I'm going to say is my best under the radar performance, which is a movie called Rob Roy, which Zach, that I've been a huge fan of this movie for a long time. This is a movie, sort of Scottish history movie, actually came out the exact same year as Braveheart. But I think, and I've said for a while, that I think in many ways it's actually a much better movie than Braveheart is. It's not as big and epic, but it's so good. And the performances in that movie by all these, it's incredible. Um, and just a side note on that, it's kind of funny that the two biggest movies about historical Scotsmen from that year, Rob Roy and Braveheart, the leads were played by an Irishman and an Aussie. Like neither one were actually played by Scotsmen. So I don't know if we ever do a podcast about just Scottish actors, we'll have to pipe them up and address that fact. Anyway,
yeah,
Liam Neeson.
yeah. I will forever be thankful to you for introducing me to Rob Roy when we were in film school, and I that was never even on my radar. Never heard of the movie, never heard of the story, but yeah, the like you said, nowhere near as epic as Braveheart as far as scope, and yeah, the performances were second to none. I mean, Brian Cox, Tim Roth, I forgot who played his wife.
Jessica Lange. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
Jessica Lange.
incredible in that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and Tim
yeah.
Roth, that might be one of the best performances. Tim Roth is always good, but that performance he gives there is just so, oh man, you hate that character so much. That's great.
Yeah, but yeah, Neeson is phenomenal, and I kind of hope he does age out of these action roles that he's been doing for the last 20 or so years so he can get back to actually acting
Yeah,
because he seems like kind of a waste in those roles. I mean, the first Taken was like revolutionary for him, and it was such a kind of original story, and he like an aging, aging special operative, and we really hadn't seen that too much before. So, but then these are like three, four, five. I don't know what Taken they're on now. I think I stopped watching after the second one, but yeah, I hope he can get back to actually acting.
yeah. I
And
because he's obviously a good actor, so to actually see him sink his teeth into a good meaty drama role would be great.
yeah, and he is number 7 on the Irish Times list of all-time greatest British, Irish actors. All right, so it's halftime,
Have to.
and it is time for me to show our viewing audience and tell our listening audience how to make an Irish car bomb.
All right. While you're doing that,
Uh,
I'm not going to do the Irish car bomb, but I'm just going to have a sip of some Irish whiskey here.
Apparently, it is not PC to call these Irish car bombs anymore. It's the peace deal and the fact that Irish car bombs actually did kill a lot of people back in the Troubles.
Yeah, fair
But
enough. Fair enough. The Trouble's not a great time for Ireland,
but
or for all of the UK, really, because yeah, a lot of people were affected.
so now these are either called Irish Slammer or a Dublin Drop. But the Dublin Drop sounds like a WWE finishing move.
That's
So what you're getting
absolutely one that Seamus should be doing.
Yeah. So what you're gonna need is a Guinness, some Bailey's Irish liqueur, and you can do the Irish whiskey of your choice. For this demonstration, I'm doing Conor McGregor's Proper 12. It's been one that it's traditionally made with Jameson, but this is one that I actually prefer to Jameson. It's not as harsh. So what you're gonna do, you pour about 3/4 worth of a 1 ounce shot glass of whiskey. Then you want to float the Baileys. The whiskey's going to wind up floating on top, but that gives a good mix. And do our Guinness. Apologies to the listening audience, but I'm sure you can hear that nice pour. You don't want it. You don't want the glass completely full of Guinness because we're going to make a mess. Okay, and then you just do a traditional bomb. Drop the shot glass in there, and here we go.
Oh damn! Down in the whole thing.
Mm.
Well, I will
So,
have a bit of my Irish whiskey. This one, by the way, Red Steers is a very smooth Irish whiskey. I find, and I got it first time about a year ago because I like the name, being a writer myself, and so
mm.
yeah, thought this was pretty good.
And you have to slam it. Otherwise, the cream is going to curdle, and that is just nasty, and we don't want that. So there you go, Irish car bomb for your St. Patty's Day drinking pleasure, and we'll see how the rest of the podcast goes after that.
We'll be talking about Leprechauns, the movie, in no time.
Again, played by a British little person.
Really? Hmm.
Yeah, Warwick
All right, well,
Davis.
I'm going to take the opportunity since we're at halftime to do a hat change because this is just obviously a little ridiculous. I'm going to tone it down a little bit here because that's kind of crazy. Um, and this is much better. There we go.
Got a cat in the hat style shamrock hat now that's so tall that it's protruding out of the screen. So those of you guys listening on Spotify, you really gotta check this one out on YouTube because you're missing out if you can't see this
Yeah,
visual.
sorry to all the Spotify listeners. We've really gone hard onto the visual medium at this point. Ah, there we go. Another change.
All right, I'm also doing a hat change. I just have a classic 4-leaf clover ball cap on now. Not nearly as ostentatious as Martin's.
And by the way, This is really about the only green thing I own, and it has nothing to do with Ireland. But I just want to shout out my Saskatchewan Rough Riders. All right, let's get back to the actual topic at hand here. Irish
Yeah,
actors.
we'll get back to you about the Grey Cup.
Exactly. Who you got next?
All right, so I have Cillian Murphy now. I know if anybody's listening to this podcast, you've been wanting to know when he's going to pop up. He is 48, born in Cork, and he's been working professionally for close to 30 years now, and he's always been good in anything he's in. But he was always one of those guys, like a lot of these guys are on the list, where you know the face but not the name. He was his only real prominent starring role um, pre last year was in 28 Days Later, which was a big hit, but he didn't really parlay it into A-lister status. He was in five Christopher Nolan movies up until Oppenheimer, but he didn't become a household name until he won the Oscar for his sixth collaboration with Nolan last year, which was, of course, Oppenheimer. However, my personal favorite performance of his was the early 20th century Birmingham gangster Tommy Shelby in Peaky Blinders. The series ran for 6 seasons, and it's now going to be a Netflix movie, and it's filming right now, and it also stars Barry Keoghan. So he'll have a major role in that as well. Like I said, there's a lot of crossover here. A fun fact, he's been a vegetarian for most of his life, but he started eating meat around the time he got the role of Tommy Shelby in Peaky Blinders just to bulk up for the role. That's serious dedication to change your entire lifestyle and diet
That is,
for a
yeah.
role.
Yeah. Yeah, he's amazing, and yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Peaky Blinders. That's obviously my one of my favorites of his as well. He's done so many fun, as you said, because I think he was maybe a household name, but just on the tip of people's tongue. Like he wasn't super famous, but people kind of knew who he was. I think one that I liked that's again, I keep finding these actors in these action movie roles, but where I think they actually do a really good job and elevate the role. And he was in one called Red Eye with Rachel
Mm.
McAdams at one point. And I thought he just played this like very intense, creepy guy. And most of the movie, he's just, or a lot of the movie, he's just sitting there in an airplane seat and just being really kind of cold and menacing. But it was fantastic. So yeah, kudos to him. He can act in pretty much everything. He's fantastic.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, that's his least favorite role that he's done was for
Oh,
Red Eye.
okay. I
Yeah.
remember.
But to your point of it being on the cusp of being a household name, uh, most people thought it was pronounced Cillian Murphy until last year. So and that's just from talking to people that are movie buffs, but like when they saw the Oscar nominations came out or when Oppenheimer came out, oh yeah, did you see that Cillian Murphy in there? He was fantastic. So
Right, right.
again, like Saoirse, he had to set the record straight on all these like late night press tours that he was doing. So we're getting to understand and know these pronunciations slowly but surely just through their sheer greatness.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, bringing up. Nice to see, yeah, Irish fame being being brought up and teaching us a little bit more about the language. All right, my next one, Gabriel Byrne, who's born 1950 in Dublin, so right there in the capital. He actually spent 5 years in the seminary to become a priest when he
Hmm.
was young and had a few different jobs after that, including archaeologist and Spanish and history teacher before he started acting at the age of 29. So he got a bit of a late start in the acting career. Um, his first credits include one episode of a TV series called Last of Summer, and his first feature film was a movie with the absolutely thrilling and interesting title "On a Paving Stone Mounted" in 1978. I can't imagine what that movie's about, but it really doesn't sound that exciting. Uh, he sort of rose to familiarity, if not prominence, in Point of No Return in 1993, which was a spy thriller starring Bridget Fonda. And then he really became known in The Usual Suspects in
Hmm.
1995, which is probably still his biggest role to date. But he's had a bunch of solid roles, right? Like Man in the Iron Mask, Enemy of the State, End of Days, Hereditary. He's been in a lot of things. So he's just had a very, very solid career. So, a little bit different than Saoirse Ronan and Liam Neeson and Pierce Brosnan. He hasn't ever been a big, huge name that's going to open a movie, but he's just always been there in lots of interesting roles. Fun fact for him, he wrote the first Irish language drama on Ireland's national television that aired on Irish
Oh,
national television. So
wow.
it's something I can have a hard time trying to pronounce. I think it's dry. I don't know. Basically, it translates as magic.
Hmm.
So anyway, he is also a writer then, and obviously speaks Irish and or is able to write Irish, as he wrote a drama about it. So my favorite performance of his, obviously, that's got to be Usual Suspects, just because he's great in that. It's a great movie. Everybody knows Usual Suspects. It plays a million times on cable television. It's just everywhere. My I think his best under the radar performance though was in an early Coen Brothers movie called Miller's Crossing.
Oh
Now,
yeah, yeah.
to be honest, this is a movie I haven't seen in a long time, but I do remember when I watched it that he really stood out in this movie. So I think it's one as we're as I'm doing the research for this, and I was thinking, oh yeah, Miller's Crossing. I really got to go back and rewatch that one. I've always been kind of hit and miss on Coen Brothers, but that's one I really did like.
Hit and miss on Cobra. Okay, we'll have to get into that at some later
Yeah,
date.
no, I
Oh,
just don't find that they're always on top of their game. But
all right. I forgot to mention that Cillian Murphy is number 12 on that Ireland Times list.
all right,
Gabriel Byrne is number 17.
there we go.
That said, End of Days was probably my first introduction to Gabriel Byrne.
Of days, yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, I don't want to say guilty pleasure because I don't feel guilty for watching it, but it's a bad movie that I always if it's on I'll watch it. It's Schwarzenegger trying to do his like real drama thing, but so Gabriel Byrne plays the devil and he chews up the scenery. You could tell he's
yeah,
having a blast in that movie,
yeah,
and it's funny because this was in 1999 when the millennium Y2K scare and everything like that. Like everybody thought either the world was going to end or all the computers were going to be fucked up and all the stock market was going to be irrelevant now. And like there was such a panic around it. And I kind of got sucked into that because I was 11 or something like that. So I was like, oh my God, the world's gonna end and then this all end of days, and I got so paranoid. But in retrospect, it's a great memory, and yeah, Gabriel Byrne was fantastic in that. I think my favorite performance of his actually though was in the series Vikings, where he played
yeah,
Earl something or other, one of Ragnar Lothbrok's main rivals in the first couple episodes, and he really got to sink his teeth into a role over, I think it was the course of 6 episodes or something like that. Because spoiler alert for Vikings, he dies pretty early on in the series, but
mhm,
he really got to stretch his legs in that one, and you don't really get to see him do that much. And I think that's why Usual Suspects was such a good vehicle for him. But
yeah.
I think Vikings is his top performance for me personally.
It's also a good one.
Yep. So then we have old Colin Farrell.
He's back, ladies and
Yep.
gentlemen. For a Pikmin series, he's back on the podcast. Welcome back, Colin.
And he's probably right up there with Liam Neeson as the most prominent
Oh,
Irish actors of all time. He's number 5 on the list that I keep mentioning. And I didn't know this until I looked it up, but he was born a mere 6 days after Cillian Murphy.
oh,
So they're the same age, and he was born in another Dubliner, Castleknock, Dublin. He got his first major role in Minority Report, the Steven Spielberg movie in 2000, and he was just a throughout most of the early part of this century, he was just a drunken, philandering Hollywood bad boy. He was like the embodiment of the Irish stereotype. He was like drinking and fighting. Yeah, he got into quite a bit of legal trouble. Never served any real jail time, but he was always in scraps, and he was on the tabloids as much as he was on screen at
yeah,
that
I
point
think
in
he
his
had a
career.
sex tape at some point or something. Yeah, he just hit all the tabloid check marks for a while there.
Absolutely.
He basically
And
went down the Robert Downey Jr. Lane,
yeah, that's actually a really good analogy. Yeah, yeah,
but
like
including
for
pulling himself out of it in
exact
great fashion. Yeah.
exact exactly. His earlier roles were definitely a mixed bag, but mostly he was just doing shitty blockbusters because I guess his agency was trying to push him as a movie star because he has those chiseled features and he has the look of a movie star. But he was doing Alexander, Daredevil, and that uh, Miami Vice remake and that totally garbage remake of Total Recall.
I totally forgot about the Miami Vice remake. Full disclosure, actually didn't mind it.
Me neither. I mean, it was a Michael Mann movie, and so
Yeah,
it did have some good, but I mean,
the
it's
the
not
Total
the,
Recall one on the other hand, absolute fucking trash.
yeah, we've
That
mentioned
Total
this
Recall and not even set it on Mars.
exactly. Yeah, we've
Ridiculous. That
we've
that
mentioned
that's that movie's just written off automatically.
yeah, we've mentioned Total Recall several times on this pod, and it's always
I'm so angry about it.
if you don't go to Mars, then it's not Total Recall. Why call it Total Recall? It doesn't make any
Oh.
fucking sense. But since then, he's definitely settled down both professionally and personally. He's much more of a capital A actor now. He's a thespian, and he's not just trying to, be a movie star. And his work with filmmaker and fellow countryman Martin McDonagh in Bruges and yes, Banshees of Inisherin both received multiple award nominations, winning a Golden Globe for the former. And roles in films like Saving Mr. Banks and The Lobster really showed off his talent and his range. And recently, of course, if you listen to us, you already know this intimately. He won a Golden Globe as the titular Batman villain, the Penguin. And in true Irish fashion, he took up alcohol when he was 14, couldn't stop, got some help, and he's been sober since a stint in rehab in 2006.
Mm. Yeah, I think the best thing that ever happened to Colin Farrell was him deciding, and I don't know what happened in those intervening years in his rehab and his recovery and all that kind of stuff, if he changed agents or whatever. But him deciding that he didn't care about being a quote unquote movie star and he was just going to become an actor was the best thing that ever happened to him because he really can act and he always could, to be honest with you. Like, even back in the early days, again, it's the same kind of thing as Robert Downey Jr. Like the guy could always fucking act. He just got into too much trouble and wanted to be a star, and it just wasn't the right fit personality wise. But Colin Farrell as this guy who can both carry movies but also just be a character guy, and he doesn't really care about being top of the bill. He doesn't care about the fame. It's the best thing that could have ever happened to his career.
Yeah, because if you're just the quote unquote movie star, you age out,
Yep.
and that decision to kind of pivot and be more of a making choices will prolong his career by years and years and years.
Yeah, and you don't take chances on interesting roles. You end up doing the sort of the Will Smith route or Tom Cruise route where it's just very safe roles. I mean, I guess for a while there, Tom Cruise had a couple that were interesting where he was really trying hard for an Oscar. But otherwise, they just take these very safe roles that are just in the narrow range of what they could do and they don't branch out. But Colin Farrell has now broken through those barriers and he'll do lots of interesting things. You mentioned The Lobster, for instance. Personally, I'm not a big fan. I've mentioned don't really, the Yorgos Lanthimos movies aren't really for me, but it's great that he did that. He made that choice to do a totally different kind of movie and stretch his acting wings. I love it.
Yeah, he gained like 40 pounds and he had a really bad looking comb over in that movie. So yeah, he really leaned into the opposite of what he was always typecast as.
Yeah. All right, so now it's to me on the last one. So my last one, and yeah, we have been going sort of in order of age. So the last one for me is Richard Harris, who is no longer with us. I think the only one on our entire list that is no longer with us. He was born in 1930 in Limerick, which is just a great Irish name for a town. He was the fifth of a family of eight kids, so just clearly as Irish as you can get. He actually suffered from TB, tuberculosis, when he was a teenager. And then after he recovered from that, he moved to London. So he just kind of moved to London, enrolled at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts. Before that, he actually wanted to be a rugby player. But then after tuberculosis, he moved. He started out in West End theater productions in London, where he toiled away for almost a decade before he even started in film. His first film credit was a movie called Alive and Kicking in 1958. And after that, he was in a bunch of big movies: Guns of Navarone, Mutiny on the Bounty, Camelot, which, to an audience in 2025, nobody's heard of these things, but those were big movies at the time. Then he started to become recognized by a younger generation, if I can put myself in that category, in movies like Gladiator, and then obviously the Harry Potter movies. He was in the first two movies before he died in 2002. He actually died before the second movie came out, but and that role was taken over by another Irishman, Michael Gambon, but he was Dumbledore in those movies. So he was nominated for two Oscars, two movies that, frankly, I've never heard of. One called The Sporting Life in 1964, and another called The Field in 1991. You'd think I would have heard of a movie in 1991. But anyway, nominated, didn't ever win. Here's my fun fact. This is a fun one, I think. So I had mentioned that he was a rugby player in his youth. And later on, he became drinking buddies in his later years with Peter O'Toole and Richard Burton, who is kind of, again, people today don't know who he is. I don't really even know. I don't think I've ever seen a Richard Burton movie, but he was like a big golden age actor as well. And Peter O'Toole, obviously, Lawrence of Arabia, a huge star. And the three of them were drinking buddies, and they would go and support Munster Rugby, which was Richard Harris's team, and they would get all rowdy at the games and get in trouble. These like three famous actors drinking and getting all rowdy at the rugby games. So I think that's a fun fact about Richard Harris.
That is the most fun fact that we've had of the fun facts. Like I just imagine these three old,
Yeah,
thespians
yeah.
like running around being rugby hooligans. That's hilarious.
And Peter O'Toole, I mean, obviously he grew up in England and was born in England, but he's clearly has Irish ancestry. I think his father was Irish, with a name like O'Toole, obviously. So, a couple of old Irish guys getting rowdy at rugby games. That's fantastic. My favorite performance of Richard Harris is probably in Unforgiven. This movie that people have been thinking about a lot with the recent death of Gene Hackman. Mm-hmm. But Richard Harris plays this character called English Bob, and it's just such a great role because he's this braggart, but at the same time, in the end, he's really pathetic because everything he's been saying is just total bullshit. And he's left just like in this prison, and he's a con man. And it's just a great fucking role for him. And so that's probably my favorite performance of his is in Unforgiven, where he's up, he really, to me, stood out in that movie against great performances by a lot of other people, Gene Hackman and Clint Eastwood and
Morgan Freeman,
yeah. and then Richard Harris. So he could hold his own against anybody. Best under the radar performance, and this is almost going to be a callback to my Pierce Brosnan one on The Foreigner. For me, it's probably in Patriot Games. Now, Patriot Games is not an under the radar movie, but his performance in this is fairly small, and he plays a Sinn Féin rep. And in a way, it's kind of is the Sinn Féin rep. His name is Paddy O'Neill. Again, can't get
Paddy
much
O'Neill.
Can't get much more Irish than that. Yeah. Play that music again. Uh, but he plays this guy who's just, again, he's kind of in over his head when uh, Jack Ryan comes for revenge, and he's trying to like bluff and bluster. But again, I think it also, in a weird way, again, action movie, but it kind of spoke to the difficulties of the transition, right, between these
Hmm.
people who are heavily involved as rebels and violent rebels in this fight during the Troubles, and then trying to transition into the peace that came afterwards after the Good Friday Accords. And that must have been really tough. And it always is tough in any kind of post conflict, these people who are trying to become almost the political leaders in a democratic, peaceful leadership. And his role is very small in that, but I just thought he did a really good job and kind of stood out again, chewing the scenery in every scene he was in.
Yeah, me being the Harry Potter fan that I am, of course, he's always going to be the OG Dumbledore, and you know, there's been Michael Gambon was great for what he was asked to do because Dumbledore had to do a lot more physical stuff in the later Harry Potter movies, but Richard Harris was like this perfect like wise mentor character that had like this glint in his eye. He was very he had like this childlike humor and wonderment in his eye, but while at the same time being, a more than 100-year-old wizard.
Yeah,
And for him to play that role and then Marcus Aurelius in Gladiator in
right.
just the year leading up to his death, I mean, he was very, competent and virile and was able to still deliver a very strong performance just leading up to his death. So, I mean, not a lot of people can say that. So, that was a life well lived. He is number 3 on the Irish Times list of all time.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Richard Harris. Yeah.
Yeah. So, my last one is Brendan Gleeson. He is number 18 on said list. He'll turn 70 later this month, and his filmography is prolific to say the least. That guy works and works and works. He's never quite broken into the category of A-lister, much like Cillian Murphy until he did, and Gabriel Byrne. But man, and at his age, he probably never will, but his list of credits is something to behold. We got, Braveheart, Gangs of New York, Cold Mountain, Menelaus and Troy, Mad Eye Moody from Harry Potter. Again, like a lot of crossover between these
Yeah.
guys as far as the series goes.
Yeah.
Paddington 2, In Bruges, and and
Oh,
yes,
English thing.
of course, fucking Banshees of Inisherin. Yeah. He also has the kind of auspicious honor of playing both Winston Churchill and Donald Trump. He receives an Emmy Award and Golden Globe nom for each, respectively.
What did he play Trump in?
That Como movie. Um, shit, the name escapes me.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Yeah. Yeah, what was that called? Anyway, yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know the
The
Churchill movie
audience
was
can fill us in. Add it in
yeah
the chat.
yeah,
we,
the
we need more
Churchill one.
people to comment on these videos, so add it in the comments.
Yes, we do. The Churchill one was Into the Storm, but that kind of got overshadowed by Gary Oldman's Finest Hour?
Yes. No,
Yeah, that
Darkest Hour. Sorry.
Darkest Hour. Yeah, the exact opposite. The darkest hour
Yes.
is the darkest hour. So yeah, he did a great Churchill, but it kind of got overshadowed because Gary Oldman did a much more high profile performance in that same year or the next year. It was very close to one another. What are your thoughts on old Brendan here?
He's great. It's hard to say, I think, where I probably first encountered him in Braveheart, where he kind of plays the best friend. Again, an Irishman playing a Scotsman. Uh, but uh, but he's been so good in so many things. My favorite role of his might be in Gangs of New York, where he's kind of the neutral middle ground cop who's trying to keep the peace, but also is taking sides in some of these fights as well, and just basically knocking heads, and is the tough guy that nobody really wants to mess with. And he's got that kind of, he always does in a lot of his roles. He kind of has this big physical presence, but he also is such a good actor that that's not all he is. He isn't just always the big tough guy. He has a lot of sensitivity in a lot of his roles too. So he's been, as you say, he's had a hell of a career. He's been in some major movies, as you pointed out. I mean, the list you gave, and yet, yeah, never quite an A-lister, but I think 99.9% of Hollywood actors, any actors around the world, would trade whatever they've got for Brendan Gleeson's career. No question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right because even when he was the like kind of the big tough in Braveheart as Hamish, he was kind of the sensitive one as well. So he was always kind of the voice of reason for William Wallace. And so yeah, he does have that kind of range. By the way, it was the Comey rule that he played Trump in.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that he's been married to the same girl, Mary Weldon, since 1982, which is a rarity and very sweet in Hollywood. And
Hmm.
I know he splits his time between Dublin and Hollywood, so I'm sure he keeps his kids grounded. But they have four sons, two of which are actors. Brian Gleeson is the lesser known, but he's been in Snow White and the Huntsman, that shitty Assassin's Creed movie with that Brendan Gleeson was also in, but I didn't want to bring that up. And he also had a bit part in Peaky
Not about.
Blinders. Yeah. But by far the most well known is Domhnall Gleeson, and he has quietly become, and this goes back to your point of Liam Neeson. He's the highest grossing Irish actor of all time.
Wow. Really?
Now, this is due to his appearance as Bill Weasley in the Harry Potter series and
Oh,
as
Star Wars movies.
and General Hux in the latest Star Wars trilogy.
Right.
Now these were tertiary roles, especially Bill Weasley. He's like way down on the call sheet, but he was in them, and you know, like I think Sam Jackson is still the highest grossing movie star of all time because he's in everything, including Star Wars, the prequel trilogy. But hey, I mean, you got to take the accolades where you can get them, and I don't fault him. And he's good in everything he does, you know.
Yeah, if you're in both Star Wars and Marvel, as Sam Jackson is, I think you pretty much take that crown.
Yeah, and he's done really good work in like Black Mirror, and every time he pops up, I know the movie is going to be better for it. So good for Brendan for keeping his sons kind of grounded, and Dom Hall is forging his way into a very stellar career in his own right. Oh, Ex Machina he was amazing in Ex Machina.
Right. Yes, that's right. In what is essentially a three-person cast. Yeah. No, and I should also mention, you mentioned that Brendan Gleeson has been with his wife for a long time. So has famously Pierce Brosnan, actually. So
Mm,
maybe there's something about Irish actors. They're
got
committed.
that
They're
loyalty.
loyal.
Yep. Oh, and I got to mention Dom Hall is number 21 on that list in his own right. So
Wow, good for him.
yeah,
Okay.
he's only three spots behind his dad, number 18, so he'll probably eclipse him eventually.
I did take a look at that list when I was doing my research as well. And the number one, I guess we should say, was a woman named Maureen O'Hara. Is that right?
Yep, the Queen of
Who,
Technicolor.
yes, who I don't actually really know. I've never seen before, which is why I didn't want to talk about her. But number one on the Irish Times list, I think, living off of past glories there. But obviously, she was pretty big for a while back in the golden age of Hollywood.
Yep, and Daniel Day-Lewis is number two, but he's mostly regarded as an English guy. So
Yeah, yeah, he's got some Irish heritage, but he was born and raised in England, so I didn't really consider him when we were coming up with our lists.
yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I know everybody listening and watching would be like, "Well, you brought up all these guys. Who's number one? Who's number one on this list?" So
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
Maureen O'Hara, and apparently she was known as the Queen of Technicolor in a bunch of Alfred Hitchcock movies. But yeah, as you said, I wasn't really that aware of her either. So that's it for our journey down into the Emerald Isle, and that hope you all enjoyed and are I'm honestly a little bit buzzed.
Yeah,
So our
I'm even starting to feel it with my whiskey and my Kilkenny, but you had a lot more than me.
So I hope you join us next time. We're going to be doing March Madness Spectacular. It's going to be somehow sports related. We're just brainstorming and trying to figure out what exact avenue we're going to go down. Might be basketball movies, might be high school sports movies, might be just sports movies in general. But we're going to do one of those, and hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you for the next one.
Yeah, it'll be somehow sports related, and so please join us. And as always, like, subscribe, do all the things. Oh, and I guess Zach just did an Irish goodbye. So thanks everybody for tuning in and for following us and watching us as always and listening to us on Spotify. And join us again next time.
They're always
Slam
after me,
up.
Lucky Charms.